The drastic step taken by Tinubu's administration in most recent time, most especially the most controversial argument surrounding the independence of the policing force in Nigeria, as several personalities and interests has called for state police or regional policing as the only panacea of solving the state of insecurity that is worsening by the day. The action or step taken by Tinubu, of course, in support of the state police as the only way possible addressing the spikes of insecurity that is growing by the day. For an average northerner today, that should have been the most celebrated, of course, decision by Tinubu's administration. But that unfortunately could not be the case, as many northern Nigerians, as a political elite has argued that no state police should be encouraged because that definitely might encourage regional autonomy and abuse of same, quite understandable. But the truth remains that security is local and peculiar to each region. If the people were given the opportunity to control their own police, to checkmate the excesses, to know who checks in and who checks out within a defined territory, and more importantly, the locals are being appointed or selected in the process of course, recruitment, it will be very clear and very easy to identify the assailants, the invaders, or those hiding under any cover to unleash mayhem within the defined territory. So, for me, I believe the most celebrated reforms in Tinubu's administration, as he has expressed the political will to embark and support the state policing, that the North should have possibly changed their mind or perspective about Tinubu's sincerity or commitment to ending the state of insecurity, as it has been alleged that the federal government is placing the terrorists, the Boko Haram, in monthly allowances, paying them billions upon billions as a way of pacifying them. But if those resources are channeled towards building more uh, formidable security outfits, most especially empowering the locals, of course, to police their own environment, that would have yielded most desirable results. But definitely, as usual, the northern political elite will oppose it for whatever reasons best known to them, arguing that such will be eventually abused, whatever that means to them. But it is important if the North will abuse that or the governors might use that as a weapon against their perceived opponents or political rivals. But it's important that people we are given the opportunity to and empowered, of course, to participate in their own policing and security, as that will definitely address the spikes of insecurity and we tailor such to various communities. Sadly, we have seen cases where the Boko Haram terrorists, Fulani militias, or terrorist bandits are being celebrated on the streets of Castina and the rest of them, where we've seen assailants massacring people, people being displaced. If when the locals were empowered through the state policing, possibly and equipped or retrained, of course, possibly they would have been more prepared to face the challenges local and peculiar to them. Everybody has, or region has its own challenges, peculiar and local within. So you can't define the terms of policing, of securing a particular region to that of others. They have their own uniqueness and differences, and approach will also matter the most. So I think an African Northerner should at this time embrace such laudable development, as several persons, the likes of Sheikh Gumi, may have opposed that in recent past. But that being said, we hope, of course, they will embrace this at this time, because it is not just about opposing the alleged uh, invitation of Mossad to come and fight the state of insecurity, but state security will also empower the locals to defend themselves and make sure that security becomes something very closer to the people. It is quite interesting. Information reaching us allegedly that the Nigerian police have summoned Nasir El-Rufai over his recent claim, or possibly uh, for some interrogations or questionings. Only time will reveal whatever that could mean. But this continued incessant assault on various indigenous communities is quite unacceptable and should be condemned by any well meaning or responsible humanity. You can imagine people losing their own ancestral homes. Of recent, we saw how the Hausa communities, defenseless women and children, young ones, were asked to evict their region, their land, ancestral land. Otherwise, they will be wiped off, they will be killed if they, of course, decide to stay back, meaning that these people were interested in land grabbing, and it's quite very clear. As a matter of fact, majority of these people displaced or asked to leave were Islamic faithfuls. Now, what is that contradiction? It was greatly perceived to be a hunt or an assault against the Christian communities, but eventually today the narrative have changed. They started with the Christians, but today they are not ending with the Christians. Whatever goes around comes around. Now, one of the senators, Senator Dume, has come to caution Nigerians who may have some primitive sentiments that the Boko Haram are after the Christian communities, or perhaps the Boko Harams as anti-Christian groups. Yes, of course, that was their motivations in the first place. Their main targets, or their first targets, were Christian, of course. Processions, churches, vigiles are being rounded up, people are being killed, and there was excitement in the air. Most of the northern sympathizers were celebrating and rejoicing. Yes, the infidels are being dealt with, are being killed, and the rest of them. But today, when after dealing with the infidels, definitely there is no other person to deal with, because the bloodthirsty individuals who has been indoctrinated into bloodletting and the rest of them would have not other business but to fall back to whosoever they find around to continue their business. That is just the case. You see, when you support an atrocity and the rest of them, thinking that might not get to you, it's just a matter of time. Whatever we sow, we definitely reap. Yes. In Dume coming to say, of course, urges caution on fanning Boko Haram as anti-Christian group. Now, what does Boko Haram represent? Of course, some northerners have claimed that Boko Haram is their brainchild, as some people believe that an attack on Boko Haram should be an attack on Allah. That when Jonathan was burnt at getting the Boko Haram out of the way, and eventually there was an outburst, uproar in the north that the Jonathan Aturi Hejirika is taking a revenge of what happened in 1967 to 70 and killing their youths and the rest of them. So you can understand that Alfred North political elite in the north have sympathy or sympathizing with the Boko Haram, directly or indirectly, trying to defend them. Boko Haram has been certified by international world acclaimed bodies as a terror cell. You know what that means? The fourth most deadliest terror group in the world, whose antecedents and brutal assaults on individuals and communities have left several scores, thousands, and tens of thousands killed, millions displaced in their original aborigine or ancestral homes, indigenous persons, which in the last 15 to 20 years, they have been active in Nigeria. Jonathan, during his, of course, dispensation, uh, argued that some Boko Haram members and his cabinet, those who are sympathy, who express sympathy or support, or who are directly involved, who orchestrated and masterminded the activities of Boko Haram, are in his cabinet. You know what that implies? It's quite a very disturbing development, honestly, and this we can't continue to live in denial. So if at this time Indume is coming to say that we should not consider Boko Haram as anti-Christian group, of course that is what it is. It doesn't matter the sentiments you might be whipping at this particular time. Yes, because one should have expected the Islamic cleric to have raised concerns, condemned such acts publicly, eventually. Hardly could you see anyone coming, of course, to express such dissatisfaction and call for, of course, the arrest and the prosecution of such individuals involved in such dastard act. But the facts, of course, are unperturbed or untouched by such development, and eventually Christians were being murdered in cold blood and the rest of them ambushed, and eventually today, the narrative have changed. Sadly, the Muslim festivals are also being killed, ambushed for whatever vested interest and underlying interest they might have. Now, it is very clear that this is not just about religious war declared against Christians. It is motivated by ethnic sentiments and dominance, exclusive dominance, which eventually is playing out today. Some Hausa communities have been asked on several occasions to vacate, and the ending war between in the north is traceable to the Hausa Fulani exclusive, dominance clash, as the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, once made it public that, to be honest, the crisis rocking the entire northern region is centered on the Fulani Hausa clashes. The Fulanis now, of course, haven't established themselves and expanded in their numbers, is now contending with the Abo origins, the Hausa ethnic nationalities, who are the main Abo origins on Nigerians today. And that is quite very disturbing. And the war is endless as the Hausas communities are now bracing up to defend themselves, since it's very clear to them that it's no longer what they once thought that could be, but eventually the war is now turning against them. It's about the war of survival. It's no longer the jihad. Of course, the misconstrued that to be that is quite interesting today. And whatever is going around is coming around this time. So it is, of course, a necessary evil the North must rise to face or possibly accept, because some believe that it was the the evil seed that was sown by the northern political elite because of their greed and insatiable quest for power. They went all the length of importing these assailants down to Nigeria with the intention of scuttling or disrupting the entire government of Jonathan. Eventually, should Jonathan eventually win, they did whatever they could to frustrate Jonathan, but Jonathan, after conceding to, be, to defeat, eventually congratulating the late Buhari, then eventually everything turned out that these people now could no longer return to their base or where they come from. They decided to settle in Nigeria, most especially the northern predominant regions. Today, they are being considered as a threat to the indigenous people. Not even the Castina state itself. We've had several attacks on mostly the Hausa communities and the rest of them, destruction and disruption of their farm and economic activities, being ambushed, the banditry and the rest of them, kidnapping, paying of ransom, has been an increase. Sadly, such has been imported or extended down to the southern region. We've seen the escalation as an ugly trend that must be resisted, otherwise, the entire Nigeria will become under siege, and it's quite very unfortunate development. So the even security operatives, military personnel are becoming victim of this. We've seen cases where the military camps or base have been overrun and they cut away with the resources, the armories, the ammunitions, and the rest of them were carted away. It is quite a very disturbing one. But whatever be the case, we are now getting it clear that these people, of course, have no regard for God nor for humanity, and indeed are giving Nigeria a bad name in the community of nations. And of course, Nigerian government is spending billions of dollars in procurement of arms against the fight against terrorism, Boko Haram, and the rest of them, and they're paying a certain undisclosed, of course, security votes and the rest of them. It's a very worrisome development, but that is the reality confronting all as sundry today. That Nigeria that was once safe before the advent of APC, sadly, uh, has been threatened. The peace and unity of Nigeria is hanging on a thread. With this continued escalations, even the military, majority of the military personnel are discouraged because you've seen several videos where they are ranting, their life are being politicized, and the executive, of course, making billions out of that while they are being used as sacrificial lambs. You know what that implies? When the main structure of defense is weakened, how what will, of course, then other members do? That shows a potential risk. Several of them have been rounded up, protected, even for those who survive, unfortunately, will have to tell the very unfortunate and unpalatable story and the experience in the battlefield. Some have accused the military hierarchies of sabotaging their own safety and security by not allowing them to go head on, of course, with the assailants. It's a very disturbing development. But whatever happens, let's have your own take. Do you consider state police as the only alternative. Could that be managed? Just as we've seen now, the policing system in Nigeria is considered as one of the uh, untrusted institution with that of the presidency, according to the report of recent, is quite by the Chatham House. Yes, that the most untrusted, unreliable, untrusted institution is the police and the presidency. Chatham House is where the governments, of course, the politicians go of possibly for support or endorsement and the rest of them. These are the report they are giving. So that is quite an interesting. Though if such could be true, of course, it means there's something fundamentally wrong, and the entire system need to be rejected. But how? By who? By the same people perceived to be corrupt or that have exploited the same window or opportunities, or the same organizations where there need to be drastic reforms. And who has that political will and commitment to do that? Let's have your own take. Would you believe that is the way to go? State policing or a possible organization of different regions. Let if each region become independent and decides both the economic, political, and security future. Let's hear from you. Thanks for watching.